My son called the night after his daughter's birthday. His voice was smooth practiced, like the silence hadn't meant anything. "Why didn't you come to Lily's party?" "Mom," I held the phone to my ear for a moment. Then I said quietly, "Because I don't go places where I'm treated like a backup bank account." He went silent. Not confused, just calculating. That night I took down the last family photo still hanging in my apartment. The frame left a pale outline on the wall like a ghost of what used to be. I wrapped it in newspaper, packed it in a box, and realized something: I hadn't stopped loving them. I had simply stopped funding the illusion. And what came next? A lawyer's letter. A betrayal deeper than money. And a quiet revenge no one ever saw coming. Stay with me. You'll want to hear how this story ends. 12 years. That's how long I'd shown up every single Sunday without fail. Not once did I miss a family dinner at Tyler's house. Not for overtime, not for holidays, not even when a winter storm once turned the roads to glass. I still remember inching my old sedan down the icy highway, one gloved hand steady on the wheel, the other keeping the lasagna dish from sliding off the seat. Back then, I thought that's what mothers did. They showed up. Rain or shine, exhausted or not. I was there. And not just on Sundays. When Tyler needed money for textbooks freshman year, I sold the gold bangles Frank had given me on our 10th anniversary. I never told anyone. When he and Amber said the wedding fund came up short, I quietly wired the difference. When the down payment on their house was just out of reach, I drained the bonus I'd saved all year. And when little Lily came along, beautiful, wrinkly, and red-faced, I covered the hospital bills that their insurance didn't. They never asked, not directly, but they didn't need to. I was always there, always anticipating, always filling in the gaps like that was my role. Mother fixer, silent financier. There's a kind of ritual comfort in repetition. Every Sunday I made something warm, usually pasta or roast chicken, because Tyler never liked takeout, and Amber said Lily needed home-cooked smells to grow up with. I'd arrive early enough to help prep, stay late enough to help clean, and most weeks I'd leave with a text from Amber that just said, "Thanks, Lorraine," like I was a friendly neighbor who'd dropped off a casserole, not her husband's mother. But I didn't mind. At least not then. I believed, perhaps too deeply, that love didn't need gratitude to be real. That presence, more than praise, was the proof. I told myself it was enough just to be part of their life. Sometimes I'd sit in my car before going in, take a breath, and remind myself, "You're not here to be celebrated. You're here to serve." That was my creed. One I carried like a quiet badge of honor. And yet, the thank yous grew shorter. The calls less frequent. The invitations more obligatory. Still, I kept going. Because that's what mothers do. Right, I remember the day Tyler graduated college. He walked across the stage with a bright blue sash and his cap tilted just slightly to the side, the way he used to wear his baseball cap in high school. I clapped until my hands stung, even though my name wasn't listed in the program. Just Frank's, though he'd been gone nearly 10 years by then. That night I took Tyler out to dinner. He ordered steak. I ordered a salad. He didn't reach for the bill. I didn't let him. And when he hugged me goodbye, he said, "You're the best mom," before walking away without looking back. That night I cried, but not from sadness, from pride. Or maybe hope. That I was building something lasting. That my sacrifices meant something. I held on to that feeling for years. Now Lily was turning 1. 1 whole year of watching her grow from a sleeping bundle in a pink hat to a giggling, babbling force of joy. I had knitted her a little white cardigan the week she was born with her initials embroidered in lilac thread. Amber thanked me by text with a heart emoji. I never saw the cardigan again. Still, I kept giving. That morning I woke early even before the sun had crept across the blinds. I stretched my back sore from age and effort and shuffled into the kitchen to begin the lasagna. No ricotta. Tyler always said it was too grainy. Extra mozzarella. A touch of basil between the layers. I chopped, stirred, and layered with the kind of care you give when you're cooking, not just food, but a memory. It was more than just a dish. It was tradition. It was a way of saying, you matter to me. The sauce simmered while I wrapped the gift for Lily, a delicate silver bracelet etched with her name, the kind a grandmother passes down when words fall short. I'd spent more than I should have, but that was nothing new. By 10 the lasagna was in the oven. By 11 I was showered, dressed, and carefully packing everything into the car. The foil-wrapped dish went on the passenger seat, nestled in a towel so it would stay warm. The bracelet tucked into my purse. And me, I was humming. Humming. Because despite everything, I was still eager to see my family. Still hoping, foolish or not, that this Sunday, this celebration, would be different. That maybe Tyler would pull me aside and say, "Mom, I know we don't say it enough, but thank you." I imagined Lily grabbing my finger with her tiny hands. Amber smiling. Denise offering a glass of wine instead of a schedule. Tyler hugging me for longer than 2 seconds. Silly, I know. But we all carry our own versions of what we wish family looked like. The drive to their place in Riverview was smooth. The sky held that soft blue tint of early spring, and the trees were just beginning to bud. I remember glancing in the rearview mirror, fixing my hair, wiping a smudge of sauce from my cheek, and thinking, "You've still got it, Lorraine." As I pulled up to the curb, I noticed the other cars. Denise's SUV parked right at the front, and a few newer sedans I didn't recognize. Probably Amber's co-workers or maybe someone from the neighborhood. I parked carefully, taking care not to block anyone in. The lasagna dish, still warm, sat beside me. I took a breath, adjusted my coat, and stepped out. Their front porch had 2 potted plants on either side, freshly watered. The happy first birthday Lily sign hung across the door in soft pink lettering. A balloon fluttered in the breeze tied to the mailbox. I climbed the front steps, careful on the third one. It always creaked a little more than the rest. As I reached for the screen door, I heard laughter inside. Then voices. Familiar voices. I paused. Not to eavesdrop. Never. Just to not interrupt. That's when I heard it. Tyler's voice. Calm. Even amused. "My mom's guilt is the easiest money we have," he said. "Smile the right way, and she offers to cover it before we ask." Laughter followed. Not his. Denise's. "She still pays your phone bill, doesn't she?" "Yeah," Tyler chuckled. "Mom guilt is magic." The lasagna shifted in my arms. Heavier now. Like something sacred had spoiled. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Inside, the party carried on. Balloons, bouncing music, playing glasses, clinking. But for me, something quiet and vital slipped out from under me. Not with a scream. Not with anger. Just with stillness. I turned. Step by step, I descended the porch. I didn't look back. Didn't cry. Just walked to my car, opened the door, and placed the lasagna back on the seat. Still warm, but now meaningless. And in that moment, I knew something had changed. Not in them. In me. I arrived 30 minutes early. I always did. Not because I wanted to be the first one there, but because I liked the quiet before the noise. Before the balloons were fully arranged, before the guests arrived in pairs with wrapped toys and smiles they'd put on for the photos. It gave me a chance to breathe in the stillness, to watch Lily before the crowd distracted her, and maybe, just maybe, have a moment with my son that felt real. The lasagna was warm against my coat, the weight of it comforting in a way. I'd used a new pan this time, glass heavier than my usual with a scalloped edge that made it look fancier than it was. I thought maybe Amber would appreciate the effort. I even added a little card on top of the foil hand-lettered, "For Lily's Big Day. Love, Grandma." As I stepped up onto the porch, I noticed the front door was open just a crack. Laughter drifted through, followed by the sound of Lily squealing. My heart softened instantly. I imagined her in a pink party dress, probably with a bow too big for her little head reaching for cake, or crawling toward a balloon. That image alone was enough to make the early morning worth it. I paused at the threshold, adjusting the dish in my hands, and then heard Tyler's voice. Not loud, just casual, familiar. I leaned slightly closer, not to intrude, but because something in his tone made me stop. He was in the living room just inside. "My mom's guilt is the easiest money we have," he said, like he was explaining how to reset a router. "Just smile the right way and she'll offer to pay." My breath caught. There was a pause. Then Denise's voice, dry and too amused. "Still paying your bills at her age. That's devotion? Or stupidity?" Amber laughed. A short, sharp giggle that sliced through me sharper than I'd have imagined. "Hey, she paid for the down payment, the car repairs, and probably half this party," Tyler added. "We should have sent her a bill for Lily's hospital bracelet." More laughter. In that moment, the lasagna no longer felt warm. It felt like it was melting into my arms, like I was holding a reminder of something foolish and heavy, and far too much. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The edges of the foil began to crinkle under my tightening grip, but I couldn't feel it. I was frozen. Not out of fear, not out of anger, but out of realization. I had been standing outside homes like this all my life, bearing food and love and patience like offerings to people who had already decided what I was worth. And here, just feet from me, my son, my only child, was laughing with his in-laws about how easily I could be manipulated, how reliable I was, not for love but for funding. They weren't talking about me like a person. They were talking about a resource, an emotional ATM, a walking guilt machine who paid not out of joy but out of an inability to say no. And they were right. Weren't they? How many times had I said yes before the question was even finished? How many times had I offered before they even asked? I'd called it generosity. They called it predictable. I blinked hard and stepped back. Slowly. One step, then another. The third step always creaked, so I shifted my weight, careful not to make a sound. The air felt colder somehow. I could hear a child's toy playing a tune inside something cheerful and bright and wrong. By the time I reached the car, I wasn't sure if I was breathing at all. I opened the door gently, placed the lasagna back on the passenger seat, and sat behind the wheel. I didn't start the engine. I didn't even look at the house. I just stared straight ahead, my hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. Inside that house, they were likely preparing for photos, pouring juice, laughing over something someone saw on Instagram. I was outside, like I had been for longer than I'd admitted to myself. Not just outside the house. Outside their regard. Outside their respect. Outside their circle of honesty. I used to think love meant staying, showing up, bearing gifts, offering help. But maybe love, real love, wasn't just about giving. Maybe it was also about being seen, heard, valued, Because what they'd shown me, what Tyler had just said, wasn't an oversight. It wasn't a mistake. It was who they had become. Who they had always been, perhaps. And I had been too busy filling every silence with kindness to notice the pattern. Still, I didn't cry. The part of me that might have broken had already begun to calcify. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and typed a quick message. Sorry. Got called into work. Can't make it. Hope Lily has a beautiful day. I didn't send it with regret. Only with clarity. Let them assume what they wanted. Let them eat their cake and take their photos and never once notice I wasn't there until the lasagna was missing from the table. For the first time in years, I wasn't offering. I wasn't fixing. I wasn't explaining. I was choosing silence. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My lipstick was still intact, my hair still carefully curled. But something in my eyes had shifted. Something deep. Something final. And as I turned the key in the ignition and slowly pulled away from the curb, I asked myself a question I already knew the answer to. When did my love become their entitlement? And why did it take me this long to realize? I was the only one treating it like a gift. I didn't turn on the lights when I got home. The apartment was quiet, shadowed in late afternoon gray. I didn't bother taking off my coat. I stood there in the kitchen, the keys still clutched in my hand, the lasagna forgotten in the car, and I just stood. My hands felt empty, like they'd let go of something I couldn't quite name. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't tired. I wasn't even angry. I was something else. Something still. Something clear. The silence was heavy, but not unbearable. It wrapped around me like a soft but suffocating shawl. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't try to escape it. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, coat damp from the early spring drizzle, and looked out the kitchen window into the dusk. My reflection stared back at me faintly, older than I remembered. I thought of all the Sundays, all the dinners, all the phone calls that began with "Hey Mom" and ended with a favor. I thought of all the times I'd convinced myself it was love. But now I began to see the signs I had trained myself to overlook. Tyler only called when he needed something. I could count on one hand the number of times he called just to talk, just to ask how I was. And even those times they usually ended with a lead-in. So there's this thing with the car, or Amber and I were wondering if you could. Amber never once invited me anywhere. No brunches. No spa days. No weekend trips. She never thought to say, "Lorraine, you work too hard. Let's go for a walk." I wasn't part of her idea of family. I was a fixture. Dependable, quiet, peripheral. And Denise. Denise always called me the stable one. Like it was a compliment. "Lorraine's got it handled," she would say with a dismissive smile. "She's the rock in the family." But there's a fine line between being a rock and being a doormat with excellent posture. I had confused reliability with being taken for granted. I walked to the living room and sat on the edge of the couch. I didn't turn on the lamp. The room was fading into darkness around me, and I let it. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Amber, or Tyler, maybe both. I didn't check. I wasn't ready to hear more fake cheerfulness or carefully disguised demands. Instead, I stood, walked to the small desk in the corner, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed too brightly against the dim room. I squinted, then began typing. Deliberate, methodical. Bank account. I logged in. My name appeared first, followed by Tyler's listed as a secondary user on an account I had opened when he got married. Just in case I had said, I had wanted to make life easier for them. I had wanted to be useful. I clicked through the options. Remove secondary user. Are you sure? Yes. Savings account. He wasn't listed on this one, but Amber had the routing number. She had used it more than once. Just a temporary transfer, she'd said. That temporary money never returned. I transferred the entire balance into a new account I opened right then and there. New routing number. New security settings. Then I enabled two-factor authentication. A code would be required for every login attempt sent directly to my phone. I updated my passwords, each one longer and more nonsensical than the last. I used random words I wouldn't remember: fig, bubble 92, ocean, whisper 700. I moved to the investment accounts next. Tyler's name had appeared as an emergency contact. Not anymore. I replaced it with Joanne's. She'd be surprised, but she'd understand. I went through everything. Insurance policies, retirement accounts, backup keys, even the old joint Costco membership Amber had asked me to sign up for just to save money on diapers. I canceled the card. Then I found the folder I'd created 2 years ago, Family Finances, shared. It included our budget spreadsheets, scanned receipts from the wedding, a shared to-do list for Lily's baby shower. There was even a document labeled Rainy Day Planning that I had written entirely on my own and uploaded to help them better manage their debt. They'd never even opened it. I deleted the entire folder. Every spreadsheet, every plan, every password list I had once thought would bring us closer. Gone. The sense of control didn't bring comfort exactly, but it brought something steadier. Quiet assurance. A recalibration of the boundaries I had let slip for far too long. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. It wasn't vindictive. It wasn't revenge. It was a return to myself. I pulled out a folder from the file cabinet, one I hadn't opened in years. Inside was my original life insurance paperwork. My policy. I flipped to the beneficiaries section. Tyler Whitman, 100%, no questions asked. No conditions. Just faith. I crossed out his name in thick black pen. I paused only for a second and then wrote, Beneficiary Lorraine Whitman, Living Trust, because I no longer owed anyone the benefit of blind belief. The apartment was still dark around me. I hadn't turned on a single light. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional buzz of my phone. But for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting. Not for a thank you. Not for an apology. Not for permission to protect what was mine. I walked back into the kitchen, opened the fridge, not to get anything but just to do something. I stared at the empty middle shelf where I usually stored leftovers from Sunday dinners. I used to bring home extra lasagna slices to eat for lunch. But not tonight. Tonight there was nothing to store. Nothing to keep. And I was okay with that. Before heading to bed, I stood in the hallway staring at the family portrait we'd taken 5 Christmases ago. Tyler and Amber were in matching sweaters, Denise's hand on Amber's shoulder. I was off to the side holding Lily, who was only a few months old then. I studied the photo. Then, without hesitation, I lifted the frame from the wall, opened the back, and slid the photo out. I folded it gently, placed it in a drawer, and left the frame empty. Not out of spite, but because it was time. I was beginning to understand that letting go isn't always a gesture of loss. Sometimes it's the most faithful act of self-respect we have left. Marcia Bell's office was tucked into a narrow building on Main Street, sandwiched between a dental clinic and an old consignment shop. No brass plaque, no grand reception. Just a small, clean window with her name stenciled in white M. E. Bell Attorney at Law. I'd passed by it 100 times over the years, never imagining I'd be walking in as a client. I didn't make an appointment. I just showed up late Monday morning, the same morning. Tyler sent a text asking if I could float them a bit this month because Amber had a slow start at work. No apology, no acknowledgement of what I'd overheard. Just the same assumption Mom will handle it. Marcia was alone when I walked in, typing behind her desk glasses low on her nose, her blazer a sharp slate gray. She didn't look up at first, but when she did, her expression didn't change. Just a slight lift of her brow. A question without words. "You have 5 minutes," I asked. She pushed her chair back, motioned me in, and closed the door behind me. I sat down across from her. My voice didn't shake. It surprised me how calm I was. "This isn't legal." "Not yet," I said. "But it might be." She folded her hands and waited. So I told her everything. The birthday party I hadn't entered. The lasagna left in the car. The voices behind the door. The years of giving, of paying, of being useful instead of loved. She didn't interrupt. Not once. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, crossed one leg over the other, and said, "You've always been sharper than you let on." I didn't respond. Then she added with that dry clarity that made me trust her instantly, "If they come for you, make sure they find nothing left to take." That was all I needed. By the end of the hour, I had a plan. Not a counterattack. Not revenge. Just boundaries. Legal ones. Financial ones. Emotional ones. We started with the accounts. I moved the remainder of my savings into a separate credit union, one with no previous ties to my family. We restructured, my will removed Tyler and Amber as beneficiaries, and created a living trust under my own name. No shared access, no fallback options. I signed every form with a pen that didn't hesitate. Next came the condo. My name only, of course, but Marcia advised I shield it through the trust. If they ever try to claim rights or dependency, this cuts off the path. I nodded, even though the idea of my son suing me felt absurd. Or it had. Not so much anymore. Afterward, I went home, opened my laptop again, and typed a short resignation letter. "Dear Margaret, thank you for the past 12 years of work support and consistency. I've accepted a new opportunity and will be transitioning out of my role over the next 3 weeks. Please let me know how I can support the team during this time. Warmly, Lorraine Whitman." Then I forwarded it to my manager and clicked send before I could second-guess myself. It had been Joanne who first mentioned the job in Portland. Remote position. Financial operations coordinator for a small education nonprofit. I'd brushed it off at the time. Who moves their life in their 60s, but now sitting alone in a quiet apartment with empty photo frames and a growing sense of clarity, I emailed her back. "Joe, is the offer still open? I'm ready." She replied within minutes. "Still open. Still yours. They need someone who can bring order to chaos." Sound familiar? I smiled for the first time in days. That night I started making lists. Not packing lists. Not yet. But lists of what I'd take with me and what I'd leave behind. The linen closet, donate most of it. Holiday decor. Keep only what held no shared memories. Family photo albums into a sealed box marked, "Not for now." I didn't tell anyone. Not Tyler. Not Amber. Not even my neighbors. I moved quietly like a tide drawing out from the shore, smooth and unnoticed. I deleted social media accounts that had been lifelines to my son's life. Photos of Lily I used to revisit during long evenings, Amber's carefully curated holiday spreads. Gone. The apartment began to change shape. Fewer things on the shelves. Fewer reminders on the fridge. The air felt lighter, and I realized how much space guilt had taken up. Every step was silent. Every move was deliberate. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just shifted. At work, I trained my replacement, answered questions, smiled politely, declined the farewell lunch, said I had family plans. Funny how easy it was to lie with a straight face when you stopped trying to keep everything glued together. On my last Friday, I boxed up my desk in under an hour. Just a few framed quotes, a favorite mug, and one photograph of me and Frank from our trip to Banff back when Tyler was just a baby. I walked out of the building and didn't look back. That weekend, I met Joanne for coffee. We sat at a cafe that overlooked the river, both of us wrapped in light jackets and memories. She didn't ask for details. She just handed me a folder with information about the new job, a few local listings for short-term rentals in Portland, and a post-it note that read, "You are not starting over. You are moving forward." That night, I cleared the top drawer of my bedside table. Out went the birthday cards from years past that said nothing more than, "Thanks, Mom," in Tyler's messy handwriting. Out went the receipts I had once saved in case they wanted to repay me. They never asked. Out went the tiny pair of baby socks I'd saved from Lily's first week, tucked in a tissue-lined box. I didn't throw them away. I just packed them in a chest with other pieces of who I used to be. I wasn't discarding my past. I was choosing not to carry it everywhere I went. As I lay in bed, the room half-shadowed, I realized something I hadn't dared to admit out loud. I had been afraid of what would happen if I stopped giving. If I stopped showing up. If I stopped saying yes. But I had never once asked what would happen if I didn't. And now I was about to find out. I wasn't running. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was leaving a version of myself behind that had spent too many years believing she had to earn love by erasing her own needs. And when I closed my eyes, I felt something stir. Not fear, not regret. Relief. Because for the first time in decades, I wasn't bracing for the next request, the next guilt trip, the next quiet erasure of my worth. I was just breathing. And planning. And becoming. The call came 3 days later. I was standing in the kitchen folding clean dish towels when my phone buzzed on the counter. The name glowed on the screen, Amber. No photo. Just a name that once brought me hope, now dulled by silence and distance. I let it ring twice before answering. Lorraine. Her voice was soft, hesitant. Too soft. It was the voice of someone who wanted something, but knew she had to walk carefully to get it. Yes, I was hoping we could maybe meet for coffee this week. Tyler's been stressed, and we thought maybe we could talk about some things. Finances, mostly. Finances. There it was, like clockwork. Amber, I said evenly, folding one last towel and placing it in the drawer. I'm busy. A pause. Oh, okay. Well, maybe another time. It's just that Tyler. I'm learning how to live without rescuing anyone, I said. And then I hung up. I didn't slam the phone down. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anything sharp. Just that quiet certainty again humming beneath the surface. The kind that holds you upright when guilt tries to pull you back under. That afternoon, I took a walk through the park, stopping at the little pond where I used to feed ducks with Tyler when he was still small enough to hold my hand without shame. Spring was creeping in. Green shoots, sprouting at the edges of benches, children chasing each other with kites that never quite caught the wind. I sat on a bench and watched the clouds roll in slow and unbothered. I thought about how many years I had raced through life trying to stay ahead of their needs, their wants, their emergencies. Now, for once, the world could move without me. That evening, an email arrived from Denise. The subject line was simply, "I'm sorry." I opened it, though I shouldn't have. The first line was polite, vaguely apologetic. "I think there's been some misunderstanding." But it quickly turned into something else. She said she was sorry I hadn't felt welcome at the party. She said Amber had been overwhelmed and didn't mean to exclude. She said Tyler had always admired my strength and that he may have said some things out of context. Then came the pivot. "It's just hard for them financially," she wrote. "And I know you've always been the glue. The helper. The steady one. Maybe you could find it in your heart to talk to them. Not as a bank, of course, just as a mother." She ended it with, "Family is messy sometimes, but we all need each other." I closed the laptop and exhaled through my nose. It was astonishing, really. The way some people could dress up guilt in flowers and call it love. The way they could use words like heart and family to excuse manipulation. Denise wasn't apologizing. She was reminding me of my role in their system. The benefactor. The silent fixer. But I wasn't interested in playing that part anymore. Later that night, Tyler called. I let it ring longer this time before answering. My voice came out steady, my posture already upright from where I sat at the edge of the bed. "Mom," he asked, sounding halfway between annoyed and concerned. "What happened? Why didn't you come to Lily's party?" I didn't sigh. I didn't soften. I didn't offer any excuses. "I don't go where I'm treated like a backup account," I said. Silence. "Come on, Mom. That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I asked. He paused again. I could hear him trying to think, trying to find the version of himself that I might still believe in. But I'd already seen too much. "You know," he said slowly, "we were all wondering where you were. Lily missed you." I almost faltered at that. Almost. But then I remembered the lasagna. The laughter. The certainty in his voice when he'd said Mom's guilt is the easiest money we have. "I'm sure she did," I said gently. "Tell her I love her." And I hung up. I sat there for a long time afterward, holding the phone in my lap like it still weighed something. It didn't. Not anymore. Outside, the streetlights flickered on one by one. Pale orange halos glowing through the curtains. I stood up, walked into the living room, and stared at the single remaining photograph on the shelf. It was the only one I hadn't boxed away. A family picture taken the Christmas after Lily was born. Tyler standing tall behind Amber, who held the baby swaddled in red. Denise next to her, beaming. And me off to the side, one hand resting lightly on the armrest of the couch, smiling like I belonged. I reached for the frame. The glass was cool against my fingers. I turned it over, loosened the backing, and slid the photograph out. No hesitation. No second glance. I placed it in a manila envelope and sealed it. Then I tucked it into a cardboard box with the others. Cards, school drawings, letters written in pencil and crayon, and good intentions. I didn't throw anything away. I just removed it from view. Because this wasn't about erasing the past. It was about refusing to live inside it. I returned the frame to the shelf. Empty, silver-edged, quietly waiting for something new. Then I turned off the lights and went to bed. Not as a mother burdened with shame, but as a woman learning how to disappear without dying. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just absence. And for once, the absence felt like power. The envelope was thick. Too thick for a card, too rigid for a letter. And it was marked "Certified Mail" in bold red print. I knew what it was before I opened it. There's a certain weight to betrayal when it comes in legal formatting and Times New Roman. A kind of finality that doesn't scream or slam doors. It just sits in your mailbox and waits to be signed for. The receptionist at my building gave me a sympathetic look when she handed it over. "Said it was personal," she mumbled, as if that might soften the blow. I nodded, thanked her, and carried the envelope upstairs like it was made of stone. I didn't sit down right away. I didn't need to. I knew what this was. I'd felt it coming for weeks. Since the party, since the phone calls, since the silences that said more than any words ever could. I opened it carefully. The pages were stiff formal, littered with phrases that didn't belong in any mother's life. Verbal agreements, financial abandonment, emotional destabilization. There was even a line about undue hardship caused by the sudden withdrawal of long-term familial support. In other words, they were suing me. Tyler and Amber were suing me. For money I had never asked to be repaid. For decisions I had made out of love. For gifts I had given freely without ledger or loan agreement. They had listed every dollar. Tuition payments, wedding contributions, the down payment on their home, even the emergency transfers I'd made late at night when their heat went out or their car broke down. All totaled up like a bill they never planned to pay until I stopped giving. And now, because I had chosen silence, because I had finally said no, they wanted to punish me for it. I didn't cry. I laughed. Not out loud, not the way one laughs at something funny, but the kind of laugh that escapes you when disbelief breaks through the last thread of shock. A quiet, breathy chuckle that says, "Of course. Of course it was always going to end this way." I read the packet from start to finish, my eyes lingering, not on the numbers, but on the language. It wasn't about money. Not really. It was about control. They didn't just want to take from me. They wanted to shape the story. To paint me as the villain, in the very narrative I had spent decades writing with my own hands, with my own heart. The generous mother had become the obstacle. The giver had become the enemy. I folded the documents neatly, slid them back into the envelope, and placed it on the kitchen counter next to my teacup. Then I picked up the phone and dialed Marcia. She answered on the second ring. They filed, she asked, no pleasantries, no preamble. Yes. A pause. Send me everything. I already did. Scanned it and emailed just now. Another pause. You okay? I exhaled slowly. They didn't just want help. They wanted to own me. Marcia didn't respond right away. Then softly. They always do once they realize your silence is stronger than their noise. The next morning, I met her in her office. She had already reviewed the documents. No signed contracts. No written agreements. No promissory notes. It's baseless, she said, flipping through the pages like they were a bad joke. But it's noisy. Messy. Designed to scare you into compromise. I nodded. I'm not scared. She looked at me, really looked at me, and smiled. Good. Then we'll handle it. She explained our options. We could file a motion to dismiss. We could countersue for harassment for emotional distress. We had plenty of legal ground to stand on. But I shook my head before she could finish. I don't want revenge, I said. I just want peace. I want it over. Marcia closed the file and leaned back in her chair. Then we make it disappear. Quietly. Thoroughly. She laid out the plan. No public court battles. No escalation. Just a clean legal rebuttal that would dismantle their claims point by point. Facts, not feelings. Documents, not stories. Let the silence speak for itself. As I left her office, the air felt heavier. Not from the weight of the lawsuit, but from the knowledge that the people I had built my life around were willing to destroy me just because I'd stopped giving them pieces of myself. Later that week, Amber emailed me. Her tone was polished professional, like she was writing a memo for work. We regret that it has come to this, she wrote. But we feel it's important to clarify expectations around support, especially given the abrupt changes in our financial planning. Support. That word again. I didn't reply. 2 days after that, Tyler called. I never wanted this to happen, he said. But you left us with no choice. I said nothing. Mom, we're not trying to hurt you. We thought we had an understanding. All these years we thought you were an endless resource. I interrupted, my voice calm. A faucet you could turn on when the bills piled up. He hesitated. No, that's not what I meant. But that's what you did. There was a long pause. You raised me to think you'd always be there, he finally said. And you believed that meant I never had a right to stop, I replied. He didn't respond. He just hung up. After that, I didn't hear from him again. Not directly. Everything came through lawyers. Statements. Claims. Requests. I didn't waver, because I had already lost the version of my son I once loved. What remained wasn't someone I recognized. And maybe that was the cruelest part, realizing that I had held on to a memory, not a person. Weeks passed. Marcia handled the filings with quiet precision. The court dismissed the case without fanfare. No damages, no hearings. Just a notice, stamped and mailed like it was any other administrative task. When she called to tell me I was sitting by the window with a cup of tea watching the light fade across the tops of the buildings. "It's done," she said. I nodded. "Thank you." She hesitated. "Do you want to file a claim for legal fees?" "No." "You sure?" "Yes." Because what I wanted couldn't be paid back. Not in money. Not in apologies. What I wanted was something they couldn't give. Respect. Love. Decency. And now, finally, silence. I took a sip of tea, let the warmth fill the quiet spaces, and thought to myself, they tried to take everything. And in the end, I gave them nothing. Because that was all they were entitled to. Under the sterile hum of overhead lights, Marcia spread the documents across her desk like puzzle pieces she'd been quietly collecting. Her hands moved quickly, but her eyes, sharp and steady, took in every line, every stamp, every signature that didn't quite match. I sat across from her in silence, the faint scent of coffee and printer toner wrapping around us. It was just another Tuesday morning. But something had shifted. She tapped her pen on the corner of a form. "This is where it started," she said. "Your name. Your social security number. But not your hand." I leaned in. The document looked official. Bank authorization forms, loan agreements, even tax filings. But the signature, though neat and smooth, wasn't mine. Not exactly. It mimicked the slant, the rhythm. Enough to pass a quick check. But Marcia wasn't a quick check kind of woman. She flipped to the next page. "This one's more recent. See the loop in the R, not yours. Too clean." I stared at it for a moment, letting the realization sink in. Not with shock, but with the slow, cold weight of confirmation. Somewhere deep down I had known. I just hadn't wanted to look. "Whose is it?" I asked, though I already knew. Marcia looked up, her expression unreadable. "Tyler submitted these for a small business loan 2 years ago. He claimed you were a silent investor. Denise co-signed." The name hit like a slap I didn't see coming. "Denise," I repeated. She nodded. "According to the paperwork, you provided the capital. They funneled the money into a private LLC registered under a shell name, T&D Consulting. The T and D weren't subtle." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mouth had gone dry. My hands cold. "It gets worse." Marcia continued, flipping through a few more sheets. "He filed tax deductions under your name. Claimed caregiving expenses, charitable contributions, even home office renovations using your address." I blinked slowly. Using my tax ID. Yes. We've verified with the IRS. The activity spans 3 tax years. It was clever. Quiet, scattered, never enough to trigger alarms on its own. But together, she slid the pages into a neat stack. It's criminal fraud, Lorraine. She said it gently, like she was saying something about the weather. And still, I didn't cry. Because I was past tears. I nodded. What now? We file a report, she said. Send everything to the proper authorities. I'll handle the forensics. Get a handwriting analyst on the signatures. This isn't just theft. It's identity misuse forgery and federal-level fraud. I pressed my palm flat on the surface of the desk, grounding myself. And what happens to them? That's not your concern anymore. I looked up. It used to be. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Because we both knew something I hadn't said out loud. I wasn't here for justice. I was here to stop the story. I signed the last document with my actual signature. Slow, deliberate, a little shaky, but undeniably mine. Then I stood, thanked her, and left the office without looking back. That night, I didn't sleep much. I walked the apartment barefoot, the wood floor cool beneath my feet. The quiet so deep I could hear the refrigerator click and settle. I thought about every time I had told myself they just needed a little help. That they were under stress. That things would get better. I thought about how I used to leave the hallway light on just in case Tyler came home late and forgot his keys. I thought about the way Amber would smile when I handed her grocery cards, always saying you didn't have to, even as she slid them into her purse like they belonged to her. I thought about Denise, who once told me that some mothers just like being needed too much. She had said it with a smile like a joke, and I'd laughed like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was prophecy. 2 weeks passed before I heard anything. Marcia called just after dinner on a Thursday. Her voice was firm, but not rushed. Investigation is open, she said. The loan officer at the credit union filed a corroborating statement. They've pulled banking records, matched IP addresses to submissions. Tyler's flagged. Denise and Amber are listed as secondary agents. I didn't ask what that meant. I just asked, what do I have to do? Nothing, she said. You're the victim in this. The word hung between us. Victim. It didn't sting the way I thought it would. It just sat there. Still. Heavy. The investigator may reach out for a statement, she continued. But otherwise it's out of your hands now. I thanked her again. Then I hung up and sat by the window watching the last of the daylight fade behind the rooftops. For the first time in a long time, the silence wasn't something I had to fill. It was something I welcomed. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt light. Not like joy, not like relief, but like someone had taken off a backpack I'd forgotten I was wearing. News traveled fast in our town. By Monday, I heard through Joanne that Tyler had been placed on leave from his job. Something about a pending investigation. Amber's social media went dark. Denise stopped showing up at her volunteer post at the senior center. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. Because none of this brought anything back. Not the lasagna. Not the laughter I used to imagine in my kitchen. Not the version of Tyler I used to believe in. It just closed a door that had been hanging crooked on its hinges for far too long. That night, I took out an old box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were journals. Pages and pages of handwriting dating back to when Tyler was born. Notes I'd written during long nights, questions I'd asked myself when I wasn't sure I was doing this motherhood thing right. Birthday party plans. Grocery lists. Letters I never sent. I read through them slowly, the way one reads old maps trying to remember the paths they once believed in. Then I placed the journals back into the box, closed the lid, and taped it shut. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I was finally done trying to make it all make sense. Some betrayals don't need to be solved. They just need to be left behind. The apartment in Portland was small. Just a one-bedroom with wide windows and a soft, creaky floor. But it was mine. There was no dining table, no family portraits on the walls, no high chair in the corner waiting for the next grandchild visit. Just clean, light, pale gray curtains that fluttered in the breeze from the river, and a peace I hadn't known I needed. I moved in with 3 suitcases, a set of donated cookware Joanne had left on the counter, and a pair of paddling gloves that she swore I'd need come spring. The rest, the framed photos, the baby keepsakes, the wedding dish set, had been left behind. I didn't want reminders. I wanted space. My first morning there, I made tea in silence. No one to ask if I needed help. No one to walk in half asleep, demanding eggs. No tiny footsteps running to the couch to watch cartoons. Just me, the steam curling out of the mug, and the quiet lapping of water from the river outside. I sat by the window, the sunlight catching the fine dust on the sill, and listened to my own breath. It felt strange, like visiting a museum version of myself, one who didn't owe anyone anything. Later that week, I walked into the little neighborhood bank Joanne had recommended. The teller was young, with nervous hands and a kind smile. When she asked for the name to put on the new account, I paused just long enough for her to look up. Lorraine Rivers, I said. It was my mother's name, her maiden name, the one she wore long before she became a wife or anyone's mother. I'd never used it professionally, never claimed it publicly. But now it felt like a kind of return, a quiet reclamation. The teller smiled as she slid the forms across. Welcome to your new start. I nodded. That's exactly what this is. I furnished the apartment slowly. A second-hand bookshelf, a reading chair by the window, a tiny cafe table just big enough for 1 bowl and 1 cup. I didn't buy a couch for guests. I wasn't expecting any. On Sundays, I still cooked. Not lasagna. Not the layered, heavy kind of love I used to bring to other people's doorsteps. Now it was lighter things. Roasted vegetables, a soup I'd found in a cookbook Joanne lent me, sometimes just toast, and fresh berries with honey. No pressure. No performance. I joined a book club that met at the corner bookstore. They were mostly women my age or older, retired teachers, librarians, 2 retired flight attendants with matching scarves and an eye roll for every book they disliked. I didn't talk much at first. I just listened. By the 3rd meeting, they started to call me the woman with the quiet smile. When I finally spoke, it was to offer a thought about a memoir we were reading. I said, sometimes I think we confuse being needed with being loved. The room went still for a moment, and then Janice, the older of the 2 flight attendants, tilted her head and said, "Well, damn. That hit." They laughed, and I laughed too. Not because it was funny, but because I hadn't expected to be seen. Joanne and I met every Saturday for coffee, and once the weather warmed, she took me to the water. "You're learning to paddleboard," she announced one morning with a mischievous grin. No excuses. It's time. I protested. My knees, my balance, my age. But she didn't care. We wobbled our way onto the boards, shrieking with laughter as we both fell in within minutes. The water was cold, our arms flailed, and we ended up on the dock soaked and laughing so hard I thought I'd crack a rib. "I haven't laughed like that in years," I told her, teeth chattering. "That's because you forgot," how she replied. She was right. I started walking every morning before work, just a 30-minute loop along the river path. I liked the rhythm of it. The way the sun slowly lit up the water, the early joggers and quiet nods of strangers. No one knew who I was. No one asked about my children. I was just Lorraine. A woman in good sneakers carrying coffee, breathing in salt air. Some mornings I'd stop at the bakery for a scone and sit on the bench outside listening to the world wake up. I started to recognize faces. Barb from the book club, the older man who whistled jazz tunes as he walked his golden retriever. The young barista who gave me the wrong drink once, and then remembered my name every time after that. They didn't know my past. They didn't know who I'd given up or what I'd lost. They only knew how I listened, how I laughed quietly, how I tipped generously, and always said thank you twice. That's what people began to call me. The woman who listens. I wasn't someone's mother or grandmother. I wasn't a backup wallet or a babysitter. I was just me. One evening, Joanne and I sat on my little balcony with cups of tea and the hum of summer traffic in the background. She looked around the space, small, clean, comfortable, and asked, "Do you miss it?" I didn't have to ask what she meant. I miss the idea of it. I said, the version of motherhood I thought I had. But no, I don't miss the way it made me disappear. She nodded, sipped her tea, and said nothing more. We watched the boats pass the lights flickering across the water. I felt the quiet settle in again. Not the heavy kind I used to carry, but the kind that lets you rest. It took time. Months, really. But the weight began to lift. The guilt, the habit of reaching for my phone to check in the urge to bake too much food. It all faded little by little. Some evenings I'd think of Lily. Her baby laugh, the way she clapped when she saw the lasagna. But the grief didn't burn anymore. It just ached gently, like a scar on a cold morning. I didn't call. I didn't check in. I didn't ask. Because I had learned silence is not absence. It's space. And sometimes space is the most generous thing you can give yourself. That fall I bought myself a birthday cake for the first time in years. Just a small 1 lemon with raspberry filling. I lit a single candle, sang to myself softly, and made a wish I didn't say aloud. Then I sliced the cake, sat by the window, and watched the river flow. In that moment, I wasn't anyone's mother. I wasn't their problem or their solution. I was just Lorraine Rivers. And that finally was enough. The message came on a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just come back from the market. Bags of fresh fruit tucked beneath my arm, the faint scent of basil clinging to my coat. I placed everything on the counter, sorted the apples into the bowl, then reached for my phone to check the time. That's when I saw it. No name on the screen. Just the number. One I hadn't saved, but could still recite by heart if someone asked. Tyler. 3 words, then a pause. A second text followed longer. I'm sorry. We needed help, but we didn't deserve it that way. I read it once, then again. Not to make sense of it, but to confirm it really was as empty as it felt. No apology for what he said behind my back. No regret for the lawsuit. No mention of Denise. No mention of Lily. No mention of anything real. Just a vague confession blurred by the safety of past tense. We needed help. We didn't deserve it that way. That way. As if pain had a proper method. As if betrayal should have arrived with tea and a warm blanket. I didn't cry. I didn't feel the spark of hope I used to chase every time his name appeared on my phone. I felt still. As if this was just the final line in a story I'd already finished reading. I didn't write back right away. I folded laundry first. I brewed a cup of tea. I listened to the kettle whistle, poured the water, and sat by the window with the mug warming my palms. Outside, the river moved quietly beneath an overcast sky. Steady. unapologetic. I picked up my phone and typed slowly. I hope one day you become the son I used to believe in. Then I set the phone down. Not on the table. Not beside me. I folded it gently into the inside pocket of an old wool coat I'd been meaning to donate. A coat with deep green lining and buttons I'd stitched on by hand when the originals fell off years ago. The coat had traveled with me through too many winters. Through PTA meetings and hospital visits. Through weddings and funerals, and one too many late-night grocery runs. It was frayed at the cuffs now, the hem loose. Just like the version of myself who used to wear it. I zipped the coat into a donation bag. Not out of anger. Just release. I didn't want my phone anymore. Not the photos, not the voicemails I couldn't bear to delete, not the contacts I couldn't bring myself to scroll through. Let it all stay folded in that pocket tucked between memory and forgetfulness. I no longer needed a device to measure silence. That night, I lit a candle and left it burning on the windowsill. Not as a vigil. Not in mourning. Just because I liked the way the flame danced without reason. Joanne stopped by around 7, bringing leftover lentil soup and a loaf of bread she'd baked that morning. We sat on the floor eating with our legs crossed, the window cracked open to let in the night air. She glanced at my phone-shaped absence on the counter and said, "He reach out." I nodded. She didn't ask what he said. Instead, she broke off a piece of bread, handed it to me, and said, "It's okay to be done." I swallowed slowly and looked at her, really looked. This woman who had watched me crumble and rebuild. Quietly, patiently, without once trying to fix me. I said I didn't even feel hurt. Just nothing? That's not nothing, she said. That's healing. We talked about books after that. About what to plant in our little balcony gardens once spring arrived. About a lecture series we might attend at the library. About anything but the people who used to take up every corner of my thoughts. After she left, I stood by the window arms, wrapped loosely around myself, and listened to the city hum. I didn't miss my old life. I didn't miss the part of me that stayed up late waiting for a thank you. I didn't miss the exhaustion that used to wear love like a duty. I missed the version of Tyler I thought existed. But that version had lived only in my imagination. And even grief, when held long enough, begins to feel like fiction. The next morning I didn't reach for my phone. I reached for my journal. It had been weeks since I'd written anything down. But now the words came easily. I wrote, "Today I let go of the apology I waited years to hear. Not because it came late, but because it came hollow. Today I chose peace over proof. Today I said goodbye without needing to be understood. Then I signed my name. Just Lorraine. No title. No footnote. No attachments. I tore out the page, folded it into thirds, and slipped it into the drawer with the candle matches and old postcards from trips I barely remembered. It didn't need to be seen. It just needed to be written. That afternoon, I repotted the fern in the living room. It had started to droop from neglect, its leaves curling at the tips. I trimmed away the dry stems, loosened the soil, and gave it a new pot. A little more space. A little more room to breathe. The fern didn't thank me. It just reached slowly toward the light. The bank was quiet that morning, just the soft shuffle of papers and the low hum of the heater kicking on behind the counter. I stood in line for a few minutes, not impatient, just ready. I'd brought nothing with me but my ID and a worn checkbook I no longer used. The teller was young, maybe 25, with gentle eyes and a voice that still asked permission before each step. "Good morning. What can I help you with today?" I slid the bank card across the counter. "I'd like to close this account." She nodded. "Of course. May I ask the reason, just cleaning house?" I said, offering a faint smile. She typed for a few seconds, then looked up. "There's a note on this account. It's been open for a long time." "Yes," I said. "Since before my son was born." She tilted her head slightly. "Would you like to transfer the balance somewhere?" I hesitated just for a breath. Then I said, "Yes. Open a new account." She nodded, again began the process. "Okay, we'll need to assign a beneficiary." Who should I list? I stared at the form for a second. Then I picked up the pen, wrote in steady block letters, "Just me." She looked at it, then looked at me. No questions, just understanding. "Welcome to your new start," she said softly, and I felt the weight of that phrase settle into my bones like warmth. When I stepped back, out onto the street, the chill caught me off guard. But it wasn't harsh. It was crisp, honest, the kind of air that made you feel your own skin again. I walked home slowly, not because I was tired, but because I could. There was no one waiting, no schedule, no errands that had to be done before they needed something. I passed the bakery where I used to stop for cupcakes when Lily was little, back when her smile still felt untouched by her parents' entitlement. I paused at the corner not to reminisce, but simply to notice that I didn't feel pulled inside. The shop was still there, still bright, still scented with sugar and warmth, but I didn't belong to it anymore. And that was okay. When I reached my apartment, I set my coat on the hook, turned the kettle on, and opened the window just enough to let the river air drift in. The breeze carried that faint saltiness I'd grown to love, like the world exhaling without asking anyone's permission. I brewed a cup of green tea, no honey, no lemon. Just the quiet kind that lets you sit still with yourself. I carried the cup to the window and sat in my favorite chair, the one facing the river. Below, the afternoon light shimmered on the water, and the boats drifted slowly by, each one going somewhere without hurry. The apartment around me was calm. No family portraits on the walls. No half-wrapped gifts. No sound but the occasional creak of the floor settling beneath time. And no ghosts. Not anymore. No versions of Tyler arguing in the back of my mind. No flashbacks to birthday parties or hospital rooms or graduation speeches I paid for, but never gave. I'd already boxed those away. Every last photo. Every card with his messy childhood scrawl. Even the lasagna dish had been replaced. This one smaller, simpler, just right for one person. And the tears gone too. I had cried enough for people who never noticed the cost. Who took every drop as proof that I'd never stop showing up. But I had. Not out of bitterness. Out of clarity. That kind of decision doesn't come with a bang. It doesn't slam doors or burn bridges. It walks away slowly, one quiet step at a time, until the silence becomes freedom. I sipped my tea. Somewhere far off, a gull cried out and disappeared behind the building. I thought about all the roles I'd carried, like weights. Wife, mother, savior, fallback plan. For years, I let those words define me, shape me, shrink me. But today I was just Lorraine. No title, no attachment, just me. I reached into the drawer beside the chair and pulled out a single sheet of paper, the one I'd written on the night I sent that final message to Tyler. I unfolded it not to change anything, just to remind myself. I hope one day you become the son I used to believe in. It still felt true. Not angry. Not hopeful. Just final. I folded it again and placed it back in the drawer. The sun was dipping lower now, casting long shadows across the water. I closed my eyes for a moment and breathed in. No guilt. No panic. No wondering if someone would call and demand a piece of me. Just breath. In and out. Joanne had texted earlier. Something about a new cafe opening downtown. I'd join her tomorrow. Today I didn't need plans. I'd made space in my life that didn't depend on anyone else's needs. And for the first time I felt no urge to fill it. I opened my journal and wrote a single line. I didn't stop being a mother. I just stopped being theirs. Then I closed the book, finished my tea, and watched the river move forward. Steady, free, and unbothered. Just like me. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you forgot where you ended and they began? Have you ever given until there was nothing left, only to be told it still wasn't enough? Lorraine's story isn't just about money. It's about the quiet sacrifices we make as mothers. And the moment we finally ask, "What about me?" If you've ever felt unseen, if you've ever been taken for granted by the very people you raised, then maybe you see a little of yourself in her.